Hey guys, so today we're just doing some Lokka talk about my new front locker. I went out in the hills on this weekend. I got to test it out. So I've got some test footage of testing the Lokka versus when I did the obstacle with open diffs. And we're gonna start by watching that video, and then we're gonna talk about what I think of the Lokka.
Okay, so here's me with open diffs a few months ago. I'm going to take what's basically the preferred line where I put my passenger tire on the left rock here. You're going to catch the slider on the left or the right side, driver or passenger side at some point on this obstacle. But you can see I opt to put the driver's tire kind of not very far on that rock and then really put the passenger tire all the way up on that rock. Yeah. Right here I start putting that tire up, and then sure enough, driver slider bottoms out, driver front tire loses traction, and I'm stuck. I end up backing off this obstacle, pretty much denied. Now with the Lokka, take a slightly different line and I'll end up using the passenger slider. But you can see, even though the rear is probably out of traction pretty good, and one of my front tires or both at different times are losing traction, I end up being able to pull myself up pretty quickly, and I just pivot on the passenger slider throughout the obstacle. But I pull myself right up.
Okay, so you can see in that cut that the Lokka, it's easy on the throttle, pick a line, and I make it up the obstacle pretty much without an issue. And that's awesome. That's exactly what I got the Lokka to do, because I don't want to have to romp on the gas pedal or really go after it and kind of abuse my front end to get over obstacles. And with the Lokka, you just, at least on obstacles like that where they're just beyond what I used to be able to do with open diffs, super capable and super easy to pull off. Obviously, I can still get my Pathfinder stuck doing a lot of different things, but at least I won't struggle as much on those simpler kind of obstacles. And I'll get to do tougher stuff if I want to do it. I'll get to make good use of my sliders. And that's awesome. So let's talk about what I've observed so far with the Lokka. So like that obstacle kind of shows, if you can tell, I'm pivoting on my passenger slider, and now instead of getting hung up on my sliders, I'm actually able to, pivot around them because I have traction and I have the sliders in contact. Instead of just having the sliders in contact with a rock and no traction, like, great, I'm hung up on my sliders. What do I do now? It's like, no, I can actually pull the vehicle forward and I can pull over those sliders and actually slide on them. I think that's awesome. We can talk now about steering and what I've noticed. So pretty much the steering is affected by the Lokka depending on two factors, primarily how much of the drivetrain you have engaged and how much traction the terrain is providing you with. So hubs unlocked, don't feel anything because the front end's unlocked. But when you start engaging the manual hubs in two-wheel drive, I hardly feel a thing on pavement, hard packed dirt. It unlocks pretty easily. But if you put it in any kind of four-wheel drive, and you usually only put it in four-wheel drive when you're on loose sand or dirt or snow, the loose sand and dirt that I was encountering while I was in four-wheel drive, the steering gets very heavy. Even on hard-packed dirt in four-wheel drive, the steering's just heavy. Like, it self-centers, it wants to pull towards the center. I found it to be totally drivable. I mean, these auto lockers are super popular for a reason. And I can turn full crank both directions, but it's heavier. It's 100%. The steering is heavier than it was before. It's not like you're gonna put the auto locker on, put her in four-wheel drive, and be like, oh, nothing's changed. You'll notice it. You 100% will notice it. I don't know if there's much of a difference between 4 high and 4 low. I haven't tested that a lot, and I don't think there's going to be much of a difference. But the big thing is that the Lokka will never unlock because of drivetrain supplied torque. So anytime you're on the gas, like, that's not going to make it unlock. If you're on the gas in four-wheel drive, it's probably going to stay locked. no matter what. I didn't get it to unlock in four-wheel drive, at least where it starts like ratcheting around corners. It's possible in theory, I think. Should be possible in theory, but I didn't get it to unlock, and I found that if I was going to stay in four-wheel drive between obstacles, like short little drives through hard-packed dirt, I found that I would usually give it throttle on the straightaways so that it was, I didn't have to turn the wheel. If you have to turn the wheel while you're supplying throttle, that's a little difficult. And then I would coast through my turns, and I'd be able to, crank the wheel and turn fine. I was taking, 90-degree turns with this thing in four-wheel drive. It's just, you really want to only coast or very lightly supply throttle if you're going to be taking sharp turns with the Lokka and four-wheel drive engaged. Yeah, other than that, it'll self-center some. I had a 2 or 3 point turn is probably what it was, but I had it in 4-low, and with the Lokka, and it was loose sand, it probably turned a 2 or 3 point turn into a 4 or 5 point turn, because when you have it in four-wheel drive and it's loose sand, like the wheels are pointed this way, but the Lokka is going to cause it to just plow forward a little bit. So you're like turning and plowing instead of really turning, if that makes sense. And that's what I found with the Lokka. Was part of it is, even though the wheels are pointed this way, the car has this tendency to want to, self-center the steering wheel and just push it straight forward. And so that's why you're not going to want to turn while you're giving it lots of throttle with your hubs locked. But, so far, first test, it's like the traction is 100% there with the Lokka. And it's just, you make some small sacrifices, I guess, some small trade-offs in terms of like driving comfort. I wouldn't say drivability, really. I don't think there's many circumstances where you find yourself at a disadvantage for having the Lokka, especially if you have manual hubs. But I would say you make some driving comfort sacrifices. But the vehicle, by all accounts, has remained 100% drivable. And I mean, I'm way less likely to get stuck now. I can take on more obstacles, and I'm better suited to handle off-road terrain. That's a good mod in my opinion. I'll keep you guys updated as I keep driving it, keep trailing it, and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.